Yeah, so we've been in Anderson for 2 years, 4 years in Greenville before that. We love the upstate. South Carolina's home. We live in Anderson, our kids go to school here, and it's an amazing place. In the Salvation Army, we don't choose where we live. Once a year, we kind of come from the old Methodist church where you find out once a year if you're staying or you're moving. And before that, I actually experienced homelessness in my own life. So I was chronically homeless on and off for a 2-year period in my younger years, and actually was introduced to the Salvation Army through shelter ministry. So that's one of the reasons that I'm passionate about that.
Where was that at?
That was in Toronto, where I'm from in Canada, and traveled around to some different cities in the United States, but mainly in Canada. So I've experienced that, and I remember my first night in shelter. I didn't grow up in a impoverished home. I made bad decisions and ended up in a negative place in my life. And I remember picking up the payphone. They had payphones back then, and calling the number for the shelter for a bed. I didn't grow up in the system. I didn't know what to do. And you get the answer on the other line where the person just says, "Sorry, we have no beds. Try again next week." And the phone hangs up and you're standing there in the cold, wondering where you're going to go, what's going to happen. That's a scary place to be. So part of who we are in our ethos, and not just my story, but who we are as the Salvation Army, is it's vital that we find a way to say yes when we're able to, and say yes as many times as possible. So we're really working to create a open space so that when someone finds themselves in crisis, that when they pick up that phone or someone drops them off here, we find a way to say yes. Because that's one of the moments where you really just stand in the way of a lot of fear and can make a lot of really bad decisions. We talk about a lot of the issues we have in Anderson. I mean, like half the crime is little thefts, petty larceny, people stealing trailers and stuff. And I really believe if we can stabilize people, get them off the street, they're not going to be in those desperate situations. And that's the kind of impact getting someone into a bed can have.
You remember when somebody said yes to you? You remember when they first, like you said?
Absolutely. It was at the Salvation Army, and it was the Gateway Shelter in Toronto. You can look it up today. An amazing shelter experience where you walk in. There's not a booth with a guy behind glass that's 3 feet off the ground. You actually sit down at a desk with someone and have a conversation during intake. And that's part of my experience. And also what we know through engaging people with our staff, finding ways to create compassionate interventions, is that when you remove all those barriers, when you can just speak to a person face to face, it's much easier to get to the root causes of some of those issues. But I remember when someone said yes, and you're desperate, you're hungry, you're cold, and you show up at a door. In that moment when someone says, "Yes, we have a bed for you," so much burden, so much stress just falls off you. Because just having those basic needs taken care of, food, shelter, security, being with other people in a safe environment, that's transformative, just to step into that space from one that's the opposite.
So the Salvation Army here at Anderson, y'all are one of the few places that take men, women, and families. Mm-hmm. And how did y'all come to that? Because a lot of places really have been traditionally that men's only shelters have been the norm over the years.
It's true. Now, part of it is just that the world is changing. So if we look at our own demographics of who we're serving, way more single fathers, way more moms with older teenagers. Who is experiencing homelessness is changing, and we have to adapt so that we can meet those needs, and we're not leaving people that are falling through the gaps. We say yes because if there's the question we always ask ourselves, and I ask my staff to ask them, if we're unable to serve this person, who else will? And if the answer is there's nowhere else for them to go, we're the Salvation Army. So part of who we are means we need to find a way to make it work. Our first 2 weeks here in Anderson, we quickly realized how much of a problem with family homelessness there was here. And we had families showing up that were living in their cars. I remember one family that was living in a laundromat washroom at night, just because that was a safe place, a warm place. And looking at people show up with kids living in a back seat of a truck, that you look into these vehicles and you can see this has been this family's home. And not having a bed for that kind of situation, I mean, you lose sleep at night. So we knew very quickly we had to make it work so that we could find ways to say yes. When a family's living in their car, They've spent their last $5 so their kids could eat, but they're hungry. It's just not good enough to say fill out an application, and if you have a phone number, we'll get back to you in the next 10 days to see if we can place you. We need to be able to support people in crisis immediately and get them off the street. Every day that someone doesn't have to spend off the street just adds to their capacity to be successful and sooner. Every day that someone's in crisis, especially families, we were speaking with some District 5 representatives yesterday and some of the families that they're working with, trying to get them out of motels and to get them off the street. These are kids, they haven't been to school yet this year. So my kids, our kids, have all done the back to school thing. You know, they got the backpacks, we went and met their teachers. There's a lot of kids in Anderson County living in motels, living in cars right now, and they haven't been to school yet this year. That's a big impact. On top of that, how am I going to say to mom or dad, how's the job search going? They don't have childcare. They're in a completely overburdening situation that really just adds that kind of stress. You see addiction flare up, you see mental wellness flare up in that kind of situation, and it just adds trauma. So as soon as we can get someone off the street into that stabilization process, we know that it's going to bear fruit in the end. So that's why we're so intentional about finding a way to say yes in the moment of someone's crisis.
What have y'all seen change in the 2 years you've been here?
Sure. Well, we've definitely just seen an increase, and there's a lot of conversation around that. Are people being bussed in? Why are there more people experiencing homelessness in Anderson? I don't know that there's one easy answer for all of that, except to say that what we do know is when we look at those point in time counts, we see that many places around our state are seeing a reduction in people that are sheltered, and we're seeing an increase. We know that there are great jobs here, and that's not a negative thing. That's an incredible gift that we can offer to people in our community that are struggling, because they can go out and get a job today. That's amazing. Sometimes when people come for opportunity, there's not always a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And for various reasons, people come and they don't have everything prepared correctly in the beginning, and they hit a roadblock. So we would say in our sheltered population, probably only about 25% of people are ready to go to work that day. And we can see a relatively fast turnaround for those folks. They're in shelter for 30, 45 days, get a great job, save up some money, and that's a wonderful part of Anderson County, and we're celebrating that and we're seeing success. But we know with the other 75% of folks, there's some barriers. There's substance use disorder, there's mental health, and if someone comes and they have an open case file, they have access to health care, we can help them rather quickly get through the system and become successful. But usually when someone's chronically homeless, and generally the rule of thumb means that that's someone who's experienced homelessness several times in a period of 2 years. They don't have an open case file with mental health. They don't have a doctor. They don't have anywhere to go to get their prescriptions. And especially for folks that are struggling with mental wellness, they haven't been on any medication sometimes for years when they decide to come in. So there's a case management process that has to happen. And right now, one of the issues is that a lot of the funding sources for shelter want to limit who and how we shelter. And there's a target date that's given. So here we do not accept federal dollars for shelter through those programs. But one of the challenges, if you do, is it gives you only 90 days. And I would love to tell you that we can solve everyone's issue in 3 months. And I understand when you look at a flow chart on paper that works. But we're dealing with people that have experienced multiple trauma for years. Just getting to the point where we can deal with some of the substance use that's happening, some of the mental health issues, that can take a lot longer than a few days or a few weeks just to get the ball rolling for those situations. So right now, we're probably averaging about 180 days in shelter before we can see someone move into permanent supportive housing. And I would love to say we could reduce that, but we have to be honest about the barriers people are facing, and we have to be honest about the time it's going to take to work with people. The other thing is that we know statistically it takes 5 interventions of someone seeking help before they gain around 2 years of independence. And that means that not everyone gets it the first time. And so we need to be okay with that. And as a community, as we find community solutions, I think it's important to be honest that not every person that enters shelter is going to be 100% successful the first time. There's sometimes a process, and that can take multiple times and multiple tries. So we want to be here to support people through that, because we're not simply a social services agency. We are a church, and we think of the parables where in scripture we hear parables say, hey, look at this tree, look at this fruit tree. It hasn't borne fruit in years. It's time to just get rid of it. Let's just burn it down. And the father comes in that parable and says, as of course the gardener, and says, well, give me one more try. Let me dig up around this and let's add some fertilizer. Let's make sure the roots are well taken care of, and let's just give it one more year and see what happens. And then we find a tree that's bearing fruit. And when we think of people that are in trouble, that have experienced trauma, that are dealing with abuse, it's not good enough to just say you have 90 days, and if you don't find a job, you're out. If you drink one day because you're struggling with alcohol abuse, well, zero tolerance, you're out on the street. What point does it serve? And we have to create safe places with boundaries. We're not advocating for that. But what point does it serve to just put someone back on the street? So we're really looking at how can we operate with compassionate interventions that offer people effective and meaningful solutions. Absolutely. So the library in Anderson is amazing. The staff is amazing there. They are compassionate towards our population, but they're not a social services agency. So as we've seen a population in Anderson increase, it was really hard, and specifically at the downtown library, as compassionate and welcoming as they are when you're taking your kids there for tutoring after school. That might be a challenge when next to where your child is going to be receiving tutoring is someone who is mentally ill and displaying psychosis-like behavior. So the library really filled a gap for many years here, but we wanted to move beyond just leaving people downtown. Also on Main Street, as we've seen all this amazing growth happening in Anderson. Again, Main Street wasn't designed to find solutions for social problems. Main Street was designed to be part of the community, and a lot of great business owners down there, but their businesses aren't there to take care of homeless people. So coming together with the city in March, they invited us to come to the table and start having some discussions about what does the landscape of this homeless issue in Anderson look like, and what are some of the solutions. So on March 7th, we said we're going to try to remain open during the day and create a resource space for people experiencing homelessness to try and move folks off of Main Street. I know the police had to make a significant investment in some vehicles, and they had to put more officers on Main Street, and they worked with us. The police are fantastic. When the police or the sheriff department in Anderson run into folks experiencing homelessness, their first goal is always to bring them here. And currently we have 2 emergency beds that we leave open for the police. So if they do find someone downtown, the police don't look forward to arresting people. So if we can offer a solution to having to do that, the police are very kind in bringing folks here and wanting to see them get off the street. Yes, in 2016, we're topped out at about 28 beds. And so we've seen a growth happen where currently we have 47 beds. That includes 3 cribs. And we have about 5 overflow beds each night. So that looks like a cot or an emergency bed. But we see that we're going to be able to add about 20 more beds in the next, say, 90 days. That was made possible by a gift from the Anderson County Council and the United Way and the Gambrell Foundation. So we're currently working on ordering all the supplies we're going to need for that, some upfits to our buildings to make an older building that we have usable, and we're going to be adding 20 bed spaces there. Right now, our waiting list for the shelter is around 30 to 35, so immediately those 20 extra beds it's going to mean that we can say yes 20 more times a day. That's a huge impact for Anderson County. So across the street from our building in the field here by the old unemployment office, right now we have a dozen people camped out there at night. We have people squatting in abandoned buildings in Anderson, going into unsafe situations, and especially as we shelter families and children that are in vulnerable positions. So having that bed space is going to make all the difference. The 20 extra beds are also going to be in a separate building. So what that means is some of the folks that are chronically homeless and hard to house, so some of those folks that are still struggling with substance use disorder, who are not engaged with mental health but still working towards that, they'll be able to come off the street. And that's really important, because when you think of that typical person, the stereotypical homeless person that's mentally ill living in a bus stop, there's a lot of challenges there. So we want to make sure that there are spaces for everybody that wants to come off the street. People will say, well, what about those people that just want to be on the streets? Now I'm going to tell you, in Anderson County, there's probably 3 people that choose to be on the streets out of about 70 folks that are unsheltered on the streets. If there were beds open for all the homeless folks in Anderson County tonight, 95% of people would take that bed. Now, what we have to understand is when they get into that bed, there may be a lot of challenges. However, if we can get someone a place to be safe in, 3 meals, a place to shower, and a safe place to sleep, do that for a week with someone, and the conversation you can have with someone who a week ago you could barely have any conversation at all is transformative. When a person experiences that, then you can have a conversation about, hey, let's get you engaged with one of our case managers. And just yesterday, we had a young gentleman that came off the street in substance use disorder, and really had a struggle kind of coming into shelter. But yesterday, our case manager took him over to behavioral health. He has a date for his assessment, and next week he's going to be engaging with behavioral health to work on those issues in his life. Now, he could go get a job today in Anderson, but the reality is until we explore and deal with some of those root issues, how long will that job last? So we want to set people up for long-term success, not just success that looks good on paper so we can raise some money and write some grants. We want to see Anderson County be a stronger community and filled with people that are contributing. And folks that are experiencing homelessness are some of the most talented and gifted people you'll ever meet. Come and spend the day at our drop-in and you'll see that. They have an incredible capacity not to take from the community, not to be entitled and use up resources in the community, but these are folks that when we really come together and set them up for success, they're going to be stakeholders in the community, taxpayers, giving back to the community. So we're interested in engaging people in their capacity, not looking at people as problems and starting from a deficit of what do they need so we can move them through the system. We've added 2 full-time case managers, and that's been a significant change, also a significant effect in our budget. It's not cheap to provide those resources. We just don't want to be a place that just houses people and provides food. That's essential, but we've added those 2 full-time case management positions so that we can make sure we're connecting the dots and someone is receiving that meaningful and effective help.
Yeah, and have you seen people that were like you that have gone through it or now on the other side and are doing well? Have you seen a lot of great stories about that since you've been here?
Yeah, we get to experience that every day. Some of my favorite ones are, we do have a growing population in Anderson of the 18 to 25 year olds, and that's heavy on our heart too, because you see these kids come in that are 19, 20 years old, oftentimes experiencing mental health issues, have been institutionalized, broken and burnt bridges with their families sometimes, and they just have nowhere else to go. A little bit of hope goes a long way. And this year we partnered with TriCounty Tech, who were incredible working with us. And we saw 4 of our residents, 3 of them that were in that 18 to 25 year age group, go through the SCMC, which is a manufacturing certification program,
right,
and get the certification to now start working on getting long-term jobs that are going to be able to support them in their future. So that,
I should have checked that
sure.
battery. Hang on, so let me get you to tell me the tech thing again.
Yeah, they were great. That was a challenge.
Who'd you work with up there?
Well, the lady who kind of does some of the recruiting, her name's Brittany Newsom, but there's a lot of other folks in that program. I couldn't just say it was all her. Also, the pastor at Artisan Fellowship, Jay Sloan.
I met his wife when they did that garden over there, but I haven't ever met him, I don't think.
He works at Tri-County, so he teaches some classes.
Okay.
But they were incredible. Now that was in Pendleton. So here's the reality of nonprofit, right? It cost us about $10,000 just to provide transportation for that course. So we had to arrange transportation to get them to Pendleton and get them back.
Okay, let's start back again talking about the TriCounty Tech thing overall,
Yeah.
kind of overarching. Okay.
We get to see transformation every day. One of our favorite stories this year was seeing some of our young people. There's a growing 18 to 25-year-old population experiencing homelessness in Anderson County. And like I said, a little bit of hope goes a long way with those kids. These are kids that are experiencing depression, mental health issues, substance use disorder, and hope is important. So we worked with TriCounty Tech. And because of a program that they have, the South Carolina manufacturing certification, at no cost to these young people, they were able to go and finish their manufacturing certificate. That's amazing. As they're building their resume and getting some experience building up to some of the jobs that are in Anderson County, we're seeing them get jobs at some of the advanced manufacturing facilities, making enough money that it's not going to be an issue that they're living in poverty when they move out of here, and they're going to be able to sustain themselves. That's incredible. It's also an incredible investment. So thinking through that, as we don't receive a lot of federal dollars, 95% of our budget comes from local donors that give, and that money stays in Anderson County. So just sending those 4 young people to college, we covered the cost of transportation to Pendleton, there and back every day. There was work boot equipment in getting those jobs, case management, time, lunch, resources for them, and that adds up. Now, so when people give, we're proud to say that we can give about 86 cents from every dollar directly to people that need it. And that's the kind of impact that we're proud of, not because we've figured out a solution to something, but because we've been in Anderson since 1910. And we've had some experience with this. We know that when we engage people in case management and do it right, that investment can make a lasting and long-term impact. So just seeing 4 people not only come off the street and work in a minimum wage job, but come off the street, deal with some of the base issues in their life, and move on. Because of the generosity of TriCounty Tech, they didn't have to pay anything to go to this course, and we've seen them move on and be incredibly successful.
What's the best way if people do want to give? Where would you suggest they go to give to the Salvation Army here?
Sure. Well, we're online just like everything else. So our website is salvationarmyanderson.org. You can give through Facebook. But here's the other thing. You see us out every Christmas. And we wouldn't be the Salvation Army if we didn't talk about Christmas. We love Christmas. And that's a time of year where I don't know a better opportunity to share the love of God with people that are struggling. And last year we served 1,500 kids in Anderson County, over 700 families that would have struggled to put presents under the tree. I know there's a lot of controversy with that, and people want to point at the decisions parents are making. But let me tell you something, when it's Christmas time and kids go back to school after that and all the kids are talking about what they received, and it's not about what we receive, but to know that because of the generosity of Anderson County, we were able to put presents and a food basket in a home over the holidays. It's an incredible ministry. That being said, those kettles that are out there, that also sustains what we do all year long. I said 95% of the funds that we raise come from local donors, and these aren't big, huge foundations with lots of money. These are everyday people that want to give to their community. Most people put $1 or $5 or $10 in the kettle. So it's an amazing thing to see a community that can transform itself with dollar bills. But every one of those dollar bills, 86 cents of that is going directly to support someone in crisis in Anderson County.
So if everybody in Anderson County gave $1, there's $200,000.
That would be an incredible impact. God can change the
Kettles
world.
start when, like right after Thanksgiving? Is that?
Yeah, they go all in right after Thanksgiving, but we start a little bit earlier than that, yes. So you'll see us out there in mid-November. The other thing people can do is we love when volunteers come, because that saves us quite a bit in our budget. So you're going to see a lot of information out there this year about volunteering for the Red Kettles. And we actually have an email set up, which is Ring the Bell Anderson. And so you can go to ringthebellanderson@gmail.com and sign up and get some information on your company. Start a family tradition where your family goes out for 4 hours on a Saturday at Sam's Club or at the mall. For businesses or churches that want to do outreach, we invite real estate agents and banks, churches. What a great time for a church to come and invite people to their holiday services. Come on out and ring the bell and pass out some information about your Christmas Eve services.
And you mentioned volunteers. How about volunteers just on a day-to-day basis? Do y'all encourage volunteerism here at the...
Yeah, absolutely. So big way folks can help. People love sharing recipes. We're in South Carolina and everyone has a delicious family recipe. We welcome folks that want to sponsor a meal at the shelter, whether that's financial or they want to put together a meal in the fellowship hall of their church, and they're welcome to drop that off or come and serve it to our residents. That's a big way folks can help. There's always something to help out with, especially at Christmas time, but all through the year. And you can just contact us through our website, social media, Facebook, or just you can phone our 225-7381 and leave a message and we'll get back to you.
What would the average cost be on just a meal during, if somebody wanted to sponsor a meal here?
Yeah, so we usually have about 50 people. And to pull off a meal, we always like to add salad and fresh fruit if possible to do that. So we could probably do that for around $300 to sponsor an entire meal. Sometimes people can do that a little bit cheaper if they make it themselves, and we love if folks want to make it themselves in their church kitchen and bring it in. We welcome that.
We've talked a lot about homelessness and some of these things, but what Salvation Army does here is much more expansive. Talk about some of the other ministry and the other activities y'all are involved in.
Yeah, so in Anderson County, some of the things we do is we work on homeless prevention. So we have a family services department. So if a family does find themselves in crisis, we can help them through that crisis. Sometimes that looks like coming alongside a family, working with them on budget stuff. And we do have funds that we're able to help people if they're behind on their utility payments. We also serve at-risk youth in a wraparound way through our Boys and Girls Club. That is an incredible mission at our Boys and Girls Club. We have over 50 kids from the most challenging areas in Anderson. And those kids are all scoring 20 points higher than anyone at their school because they're getting that after school attention. They have wellness programs where they're learning about nutrition, how to cook, yoga, movement. They're doing STEM. We have a grant from Samsung that introduces them to STEM stuff and comes alongside and supports what they're learning at school. So those kids are learning incredible things that are going to directly affect them in the economy that we have in Anderson. So those young people are learning advanced manufacturing principles through software that they're using. They're learning about 3D printing, biotechnology. We want to see our kids get set up for success, so we don't just have all these wonderful jobs where folks move into Anderson County from other places and our own children get left behind. DEW looks out to 2026, and two areas where we have a lot of growth is retail hospitality and advanced manufacturing. They also list the starting salary for those positions, what the estimate is according to the state. And retail hospitality is $13,900. The advanced manufacturing biotechnology, that area starts at $54,000. Think about that for a second. So in that scenario, there's someone going to work making a livable wage where they can buy a home, raise a family, and the $13,900 is someone who's working at a drive-through or a motel that's helping with this economic growth. And so I think in Anderson County, it's worth asking the question, which one of those two positions do we want for our young people? And what are we doing to support that?
And I think one of the things you've done since you've been here is work with cooperative efforts from the community and the Salvation Army. I know you mentioned the Boys and Girls Club, the bookmobile goes out there.
Yes.
And there's other pieces of the puzzle rather than just what you're doing right here. How's that worked out, working with the community, other charitable organizations, and that kind of cooperative effort?
We can't do it alone. So just in this kind of downtown area, everyone supports each other. So Haven Arrest, if they have extra stuff, they bring it over and share with our folks here. We're incredibly grateful. We couldn't buy all the food that we need. AIM helps us out and shares. The Lot Project, they serve a meal twice a week and help our residents with clothing and pastoral care and chaplaincy. It's a really neat. We have Clean Start over here. Many of our folks, that's a staple in their life where they have a touch point of support, and at Clean Start they're able to receive a lot of practical assistance that without it would make the quality of life go down quite a bit. So as all the agencies come together and support homelessness in Anderson and those in crisis, because it's a community issue. So as that community comes together, what we see is not just one agency doing more and doing better, but when we all come together, what happens is we see the quality of life for the individuals that we're serving greatly increase. And if that's not the gospel, I don't know what is.
Got plans to try to expand the additional beds? What other plans do you have for the future? You'll be here in another 3 years, is that?
We want to be in Anderson as long as
As long as they'll
possible.
let you stay here?
Absolutely. We love Anderson. Our kids go to school here, and my family benefits from what a great community this is. Immediately in the next 90 days, you're going to see an addition of 20 beds. Also, that new case management piece where we have a whole additional full-time case manager, those two things are going to make a significant impact immediately. Looking over the next year to 2 years, we hope, of course, that there's more low-income and long-term supportive housing. But until we get to that point where we have an overabundance of housing inventory that's affordable in safe neighborhoods, we have to find a solution to get people off the street. So our goal isn't just to build a mega shelter, but we do need to get people off the streets. So we can see even a further expansion, and we're chatting with the county and some people now at some possible new spaces that we could move into. The other piece that we're really working on is working with other agencies, the hospital, mental health, and possibly them contracting beds. So that instead of people having to go to the emergency department and spend $50,000 on a 2-day visit, is there a way that we could work with the hospitals and some of the other agencies where we could possibly provide the housing and they were still able to come alongside and support that person in the case management piece. So as we gain more space, that's not space for the Salvation Army, that's space where the community is welcome to come. And just imagine if one person had 3 appointments in a week and they're traveling all over the city and the county, some places where the bus runs and some places where it doesn't. That's an incredible amount of effort. Imagine if there was just one place localized where someone experiencing homelessness or crisis was already. Think of the increased effectiveness of impact if we could come to them. And rather than us in the brick and mortar model where everyone has to come to our offices, if we could create a space where the 57 folks experiencing homelessness or the 70 people experiencing homelessness, if we could create a space where we can come to them, what that's going to do is 2 things: increase quality of life, and it's going to reduce the days of homelessness. And everything that we can do to reduce days of homelessness means greater chance of success for that person when they do get into housing. We shrink days of homelessness, we increase the opportunity for success.
Just kind of circling back around, but you're obviously very passionate and strategic about what you're doing here, Rob. Why do you do this? You could do anything you want to. You and your wife could go do something else. You could stay here in Anderson, get a job, do something else. Why do you do what you do?
Wow, that's a great question. I guess we think, like I said, we benefit from living in Anderson. We have children who, I have a son who's on the autism spectrum disorder, and let me start again, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, we do it because the truth is 70% of people that we work with aren't going to get it the first time. And that's hard. We experience the brokenness alongside people, and that's a weight, but it's also a privilege that when someone would sit with you and share their life with you is a gift. We talk about big plans and big places, but the heart of the gospel, the kingdom of God, I believe happens in some of the most sacred ways around an open table. So we don't look at it as we have something to give to people, but as I said, we believe that engaging someone's capacity because they have worth and dignity because they're a child of God means that we come together in community. So we're not just a social services agency. On Sunday at 11 o'clock we have church here. So it's not just me sitting down with someone struggling with substance use. We're then coming alongside in the fullness of community. In that, I would say we feel called. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. And I don't know of any greater reward than to see somebody gain that independence and self-sufficiency. And it's often that we have folks that move out and come back and say, hey, I just want to give back. We have a lady today in shelter who is experiencing a lot of trauma in her life, a lot of medical issues, and she came this morning and said, I'm here to give my tithe. I want to give back. And that's humbling when you see a community like Anderson where there is people that are willing to give not only from their pocketbook, but of their time and of their heart and of their soul. It's God's work, and I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
Now, are you available if civic groups or churches want you to come tell the story of what y'all are doing here?
Absolutely.
How would they get in touch with you, and how can people ask you to come and talk to them about the Salvation Army?
Yeah, so they could just email me. I'll provide my contact details. They can just Google us, look us up. The information's correct when you put in Salvation Army Anderson in Google, and our website will pop up.